I love to joke around. Those of you who sat near me at any point in time, I have comedic Tourette's. It might come out a little bit in the presentation, but there are certain things that I'm very serious about, and chiropractic is one of them. And it's kind of a significant time in our history, so I'm going to just jump right in and be serious with all of you about this thing we love so much. So I've been repeating this phrase over and over again lately. The rhetoric doesn't match the research. We're living in a time where people are saying the world is flat. We're living in a time where the possibility for you to choose whether or not you want to immunize your child might get taken away. We're living in a time where it might be not possible for your child to get adjusted legally. It's going to happen. Either way in my house. But the rhetoric doesn't match the research. It's a really weird time. There's so much research that talks about how good this is. There's so much research that talks about how dangerous other choices are. But the rhetoric in our culture doesn't match that. And I've been in this profession for 30 some odd years. Let's leave that vague. It's been a while. And so I keep losing track of that number. But the thing is, I keep watching these patterns in our profession. And so we're trying, in a way, to prove something because we're in defense a lot of the time. And our profession cannot simultaneously be in growth and in protection or defense. At the same time, this can't happen over and over, decade after decade. How do we move ourselves into a place where we are in creation rather than defense? So there are two issues. There's an organizational issue. So you guys aren't at the organizational level, but a lot of organizations are coming in here today and they want to raise money and they want to take action and they have a fight on their hands that's really big. And sometimes that makes people who aren't in the fighting seat feel really powerless. Like, what do I do? You have a different problem. Your problem is that you are a franchise owner of this product, right? You own a franchise of chiropractic, so you also have an image problem in your community. I was reading a Facebook thread recently where this guy went to do a talk on how to raise kids naturally, and somebody called him a baby killer in the audience, and he's from the US. So we have to understand, like, there's just weird ideas out there. The world is whack. It is. We live in a time where people think that the world is flat, and we have to understand how to deal with that. What I want to say is, I don't know that it's a research problem. If someone says to me, I love research, I teach research, I do CE. I just recently did a Florida 5-hour research presentation. I love the research. It helps me to know with absolute certainty that when I make that adjustment, I am changing the brain waves and the DNA of the people that I am adjusting. That is the potential of an adjustment. I also believe that goes into the ethers and it changes the ancestry of that person. That is my experience in my life. So I love research, don't get me wrong. But if you look, these are part of the top 25 products that have strong brands in the world right now. And there is no research that says they're good for you. Are you with me? Coca-Cola is one of the strongest brands and has been for like 50 years, possibly more. And that product is junk, and everybody knows it. They've done so much research to talk about McDonald's and the junk that's in that, and that is one of the top brands and has stayed there despite all of the stuff that has come out about how bad they are. We have a problem in our profession where we're not actively creating the story. We're defending a story that's coming at us all the time. So, what I keep hearing is that people are talking in the profession about like fighting this at a legislative layer or level. And what I think is really interesting for us to think about for just a minute is that we are living in a unique time where the consumer can generate energy for a product. So in the early 1990s, I was a student and I was asked to write an article. I don't know how I get roped into these things, but I did. In Wisconsin, they were trying to change the law and say that chiropractors who did low-force chiropractic were dangerous. Anyway, the board had come up with this idea. The chiropractor was in a big fight with the state board, and things were going down, and they were getting serious. And somebody, instead of being in defense, got creative and switched lanes and actually got members of the public to show up. Because the board's job is to defend the public's best interest. So just imagine, what if in Australia we had thousands and thousands of patients that came forward to request or demand this product? The job of these legislative boards or government agencies is to protect the public. And I'm putting on this slide lists of companies that are actually generated by the consumer. Facebook is a user-generated content software. We're saying, supposedly, what the content is. People are messing with it, but what if we were messing with that content? What if we were helping to guide the story of chiropractic? So all these companies, they're created because the user is making the content. So let's just take it to your tiny little franchise. How can your tiny little franchise have your members create the content that tells the community about what you do? To me, one of the best things you can start doing is investing some time and some energy into the level of testimonials that you're creating. How can you ask certain questions in order to get the answers you want and record and edit videos that tell the stories about what's happening? That would be amazing. Instead of just turning the camera on, ask the question, was there anything that made you nervous about chiropractic in the first place? What made you get over that? What did you learn when you came here? Because most of the time, those testimonials are for people who are wondering whether or not they should take action. So the person needs to speak to that mind frame and then tell the story about what happened to them as a result of the adjustment. I'm going to switch gears for a second. I'm going to tell you a story that I think I'm going to tie it all together. I think it's really related. It has to do with my son. My children are a great source of learning. These are my two sons. The baby is Max. He was born 17 years ago yesterday. And Jackson is holding him in his arms. Jackson's 7 years old. 2 years before this picture, Jackson had started to have an experience called night terrors. So he was having night terrors, but really I felt like I was having night terrors because it was so terrible. This child was running around my house acting like Linda Blair. If you guys haven't seen The Exorcist, it's intense. He'd be running around, his head was spinning, throw up was coming out everywhere. He'd be freaking out. He was being chased by something, and it would happen many, many nights for years. He would throw up so much, we would have to clean, change his outfit, and he would wake up in the morning like, oh, how'd I get this pajamas on? No recollection of it. And at the time, I was so desperate to fix it and to change it or to stop it. Think about it. This happens to all of us at different times, whether it's with our own selves, whether it's with our children or our patients. Man, we just want to fix it. And a lot of us fall into a trap of thinking the adjustment will fix it. I see us and how we talk on Facebook. You know, we flip babies, chiropractic cures allergies. We're in that mind of I'm going to fix it, I'm going to change it, I'm going to stop it. And there's a little bit of a desperation underneath it, I think. Like we're desperate to have recognition and we're desperate for people to understand what it is that we do. And it gets us off purpose. And I was really off purpose with my kid. I wanted it to stop. Part of that was because I felt like, what's wrong with him? Like, what is wrong with him? What is going on? But you know what else I thought? What's wrong with me? What did I do? How did I create this? I've done everything right. I've tried to do everything right by this kid. What is going on? And I was desperately looking for answers. I brought him to many chiropractors, an acupuncturist, a homeopath. I brought him to therapists. Like, we just were trying to figure out what is going on with this child. Well, I changed at some point in the process. Something shifted me, and I started asking different questions because I realized when I was in that space, I was super contracted about the problem, right? I was super contracted. I was trying to stop it and control it and fix it because I was scared. You can feel it when I'm talking about it. I feel it. I haven't thought about it in years. It was really scary. And anytime a person that you love has ever gone through that, you feel that. What I realized is there was something happening. Like, how is it possible that this was an intelligent process? Because somewhere I left my chiropractic philosophy way, way behind in the presence of all that fear. So I had to ask myself a different question. What is perfect about this? Where is the opportunity here? There's so much energy in this. How could this be fuel for his growth or for my growth? How is this important? How is this moment or this many moments over years? And so I started to pay attention. Whenever I get out of fear, I get into being curious. And I really recommend that for all of us to manage our feelings, is start being curious. Ask questions like the questions I just asked. But I started looking at, what am I learning from this? And one of the first things I learned was that I have a ton of resources. Think about it, the average person in the public doesn't, look around the room right now. You're gonna see the people you can call. There's so much wisdom and knowledge and information just right here. We've all done it. I've picked up the phone and I've called many of you. We're so lucky to have that resource and that interconnectedness. We need one another. When we're in trouble, we really need each other so much to be able to help and to keep us on the path and to keep us thinking clearly. Another thing that I learned is that actually being a person that was in that situation, that was trying to fix it and change it and stop it and had all this energy about it, was making it more distressful for my child. And that there's the greatest gift of love is being willing to be with someone when they are distressed. Being willing to be a loving witness to their life. It's not always your job to fix it. A lot of situations you weren't even asked to fix it, but you were asked to be there. It's not a coincidence that you're in the room. You know, kind of like Peter Morgan was saying, it's a tiny miracle that somebody ever shows up in our path in whatever capacity. But how can we become more of a loving witness rather than a person who's trying to control everything and stop it? We say that a fever is actually smart, and that when a person gets a fever, we need to allow it to express itself, because then the body can reorganize to a higher capacity. What else, though, is happening in your life that you're thinking you have to stop it and suppress it and control it? How can you allow for things to happen and for your body to experience whatever it needs to experience? My son had to go through this experience, as hard as it was for me to watch it. Another thing I really had to face right in the eyeballs, and I've had to face this several times in my profession, is that getting adjusted does not insulate you from life and the challenges of it. And I hate that, because there's almost like we have this magic aspect to us, right? And then we have someone that we love so dearly. My mentor, Sue Brown, died of cancer. And I was mad about that for a year. I didn't understand, how is that possible? But it doesn't insulate us. I have friends who've had heart attacks. A friend who is an amazing chiropractor died of brain sepsis. But I'll tell you what, it makes us more resourceful. And we have way more life while we're here when we get adjusted. That's the gift. Chiropractic adds life. Coke doesn't add life. Chiropractic adds life. And we're so blessed to have that. The light in our eyes, the vibrancy that's in this room. Everybody, like when I meet you and I greet you, I'm like, we're all so alive while we're here. It's amazing. But it doesn't mean we can control it. We do have superpowers in some ways, but we have to understand that they're allowing life to flow more. And sometimes that means leaving. One of the things I also learned about my son is that rushing in is not always for the other person. It's usually for me. So somebody's uncomfortable, and I'm like, oh, let me help you. I got it. I got the answer. I just want to rush in. And when I would rush in, and my son was like that, it was truly terrifying, because he would be screaming. He'd be pointing at something. He'd be running around the house. And I'd be trying to stop it. I'd be trying to get him to sit down. I'd try to change the situation. This was happening in the middle of the night, night after night. At some point, I just surrendered. I was like, you know what? I'm going to go on this journey with them. So I'd be like, where are they? Let's go to a place that's safe. Okay, it's going to be fine. Now that we're together, everything's going to be okay. And he would just settle right down. He would come out of it. What he really needed was for me to go on the journey with him. And it was really bizarre, but everything came down. So me rushing in is usually, I don't want to be uncomfortable. And so sometimes one of the most healing things you can do for another human, and possibly for this profession, is not rushing in, but providing space and being in the process. Got it? Okay, so the other thing I learned is that the life force of my son And I wrote this really specifically: the life force of my son is an endless well of resourcefulness and adaptability. Now, I want to take each one of these phrases and apply them to chiropractic. So we say we're in a crisis right now, but I'm going to ask you, can we look at it and say, what is possible here? How can this be fuel to make us better? What if this is the time that fuels us to reorganize at a higher level and be better than ever? Just like with my son. One of the problems, though, is that it took time. And that principle number 6, man, it's a mother. I am so impatient. And so I don't get to decide. My son's soul got to decide, or my soul, or the combo of all of our souls. I didn't get to decide. My will couldn't have its way. And we are willful. I've watched it. We are a willful bunch of creatures in all aspects. How can we remove the obstacles and the interference in the profession and allow the life force of this profession to heal it? I know these are, we're applying principles, but to me they are life principles and they matter. They're not just isolated in a green book. So I went from this place of trying to so desperately fix it and stop it and change it to coming into this place where I was like, I am going to feel this with him. I want to allow this experience and be present for it. And I want to be a person that adds love, regardless of the outcome. I want us to think about what are we fighting for, more than we think about what are we fighting against. What is the vision that is the end goal? It's something I ask a lot. What is the end goal that we want to create? Something I want to create is a user-generated content platform that allows our patients to have a voice, that allows them to tell the stories that we all have heard for decades and decades, and let that be in the thousands, to use the new world that we live in of information and technology to advance the truth that we all know. The truth always rises. It's something I've said to myself when things were very difficult in my life. The truth always rises. Keep following a truth. One of the things that I know about being with my sons is that the end goal wasn't to be perfect, or for them to be perfect, or for us to have a perfect family. The goal was for me to perfect my love. And I feel like that has helped me so much, even when I'm with my patients and it's not perfect and things aren't working the way that I wanted to. If I could just focus my energy on perfecting my love, that will allow me to come through. I want to share with you, I had a bunch of different quotes, but before I end, I wanted to share with you something that I often read before I come to speak. Sometimes I'm a nervous speaker. It's like I wish I could sit in my room and talk to you while I'm in my pajamas and reading my books, but it's not what I'm called to do. So anyway, I imagine, how can I be a little bit of help? That is what I value so much in this life, is being useful. And so this is a prayer I read before I speak. It's a prayer I read before I teach, before I go to adjust in the adjusting room. It helps me to remember that my job is to just be of service to another human being, use my life force to be useful. I have no doubt about the product of chiropractic. We're living in a weird time where people believe the world is flat. But I am so confident in the truth of the product of chiropractic, and I'm really confident of the energy of the people and the life force of the people in this room, that we are an endless well of resourcefulness and adaptability. And may we use all of our current challenges for our own betterment and the betterment of the profession, which ultimately leads to the betterment of humanity. Thank you all.